Welcome back. Today we are finishing off the RTS timeline that began with the classics from the 80s to the mid-90s and the golden age from the late 90s to early 2000s. Both of these videos are available on the channel. I do advise to watch them both before enjoying this one to help with context. The video today will touch on RTS released from the mid-2000s to present day, which are often labeled as the modern RTS. The golden age introduced some new RTS features such as unit queuing, rally points, the multi-command function, and many more new and revolutionary ones. But has the RTS reached its capacity for expanding on new features and automations? Is the genre at the point of full saturation that if we were to add any more, we begin to water down the basic principles of not only the RTS, but video games in general? You will notice I tried to pick out a few games from this era that attempted as best as possible to keep the foundations of an RTS, but they seem to have fused in bits and pieces of characteristics from other video game genres. Our first game of this part of the timeline is an army warfare RTS set in World War II that allows you to play as either the two battling factions, the Allies or the Axis. It was released in 2006, 4 years after Warcraft III Reign of Chaos, and it was developed by Relic Entertainment and published by THQ. The events taking place in Company of Heroes are during World War II and are based on real events but are dramatized. During the time of its release, the World War II theme for the video game industry was in full display, with Call of Duty first-person shooter leading the way. So it was a perfect idea to create the first successful World War II RTS. And leading the way of its success was its ability to incorporate borrowed features from other genres. You are able to command your unit to take cover in certain points such as trenches, trees, buildings, and more, all while being able to attack the enemy at the same time. Does this not remind you of the same idea as an FPS? And we can honestly say that it was not widely seen in the RTS before. This new ability is vastly essential in the unit longevity, because if it is not used, the enemy can easily rip through your forces. One other borrowed attribute that was rarely seen in the classic and golden age RTS that Company of Heroes has infused is the territorial control points found in turn-based strategy games such as Civilization. These control points are important to maintain as they possess resources that can be collected at a constant rate, only while under your control. This really changes the dynamic and strategy of the RTS, in that fast expansion is mandatory and no longer an option. Strategies of turtling and launching later heavier attacks is really not effective at all. And for these reasons, the initial conflict between the player and the enemy transpires rapidly during a match, which in turn augments the difficulty level, especially for traditional RTS players who are not accustomed to territorial control points. Another lone trait that is implemented to this game that we often see in RPGs is the choice of 3 ability trees that differ among the playable factions. Experience points are gained mostly through combat, and when enough is gained, you earn a commander point, which is a currency that allows you to purchase abilities within the chosen tree. Make no mistake, the loaning features within genre is nothing new, and it does not depreciate the creativity of the borrowing genre at all. In fact, it is almost necessary to be able to keep up with the interests and demands of consumers that change over time. Now let's touch on some of the gameplay mechanics introduced that is foreign to the RTS timeline we have gone through. Infantry units oftentimes are grouped together and basically act as a single entity. When one of the units perish, you are able to recruit that missing one, provided that you are close to the base, with the exception of the airborne units that can recruit anywhere on the map. The unit healing is different among the factions and are quite unorthodox. For the Americans, the medic stations collect injured, unusable units back to the station. Once they have collected 6 wounded, a group of riflemen are recruited for free. The American triage may only be built near the command sector and will passively heal surrounding units. The British Casualty Clearing Center combines both the American buildings in that it collects bodies within a 150-meter radius, and it will heal surrounding units at the cost of 40 munition when activated for only a short period of time. This ability is called medical supplies. The German, also known as the Vermont, have a medic bunker that also collect wounded units to form a grenadier once the body count reaches 4. They also have an ability to heal injured units called medical kit that can be used in friendly territory only for 40 munition. As you will notice, the graphics and visuals are improved in comparison to Warcraft III and has taken 3D a step further with much more detailed, realistic models with a higher polygon count. One slight disappointment was the low frame rate visible on the in-game cutscenes that had you focus your attention on that more than what was actually happening in the scene. Each faction has about 30 units and vehicles that are mostly unique and perform certain tasks. But what really makes Company of Heroes stand out from other RTS is the unit counters that drastically affect the outcome of the battle. For example, the siege damaging units in Warcraft III still do significant amounts of damage to the unit types of medium and heavy armor, whereas in Company of Heroes, there really isn't an overlap with unit counters. The countering units must be used for what they are meant to accomplish and are almost obsolete against any other types of units and structures. Good luck trying to take down a building or a tank with rifle units. The pathfinding differs from previous RTS, owing to the fact that units and vehicles are slow to react to short waypoint commands. Not too sure if this is done on purpose to signify that vehicles during that era had a hard time maneuvering as transportation technology was still primitive, or being an actual in-game setback. This issue really takes away the tactic to false retreat, which we use frequently in RTSs. There is an ability that will allow your infantry to gain speed and evasion to retreat to HQ, but you are not able to issue them any commands until they reach the base. Other than that, the pathfinding is generally up to date, with units selecting the optimal and safest route and do not get obstructed by obstacles. Company of Heroes was a commercial and critical success, selling 4 million copies, including the expansions called Opposing Fronts and Tales of Valor as of 2013. And it has a multitude of awards from Best Strategy Game to Best Overall Game in 2006, most notably PC Gamer 2006 Game of the Year. It will definitely be remembered for its stunning action visuals and sound effects of war that simulated the feeling of genuinely being present in the battlefield. In my honest opinion, I initially didn't have any interest in this game when it was released, until I played it recently and found a new light in playing an RTS with a faster paced gameplay. The Company of Heroes series would go on to make 2 more sequels up until today, due to each of their success. But just like Total Annihilation and Cave Dog, THQ would cease to exist by 2013, and their rights to ownership would be bought out by Sega. Speaking on visuals of the RTS, we cannot forget how Blizzard Entertainment set the bar in that department for their games when they were released during their times. And while the original Starcraft game was irresistible to the attention of gamers, at some point we wondered when will the next chapter of the series transpire to the world. After numerous delays and setbacks to their initial project of Starcraft Ghost, a spin-off military science fiction game, Blizzard had decided to give the fans what they wanted, a sequel RTS to the original, called Starcraft II Wings of Liberty in 2010.
Hell, it's about time.
This would be the first of 3 installments. The others were The Heart of the Swarm in 2013 and Legacy of Void for 2016. It was a 12-year wait, and you can imagine the yearning and expectation coming from a fanbase that cherished every bit of StarCraft, and the sequel did not disappoint. We can see it has pitched in some new RTS features. One specifically seems to come from another genre called point-and-click adventure. In between campaign missions, when you are on the ship with the protagonist, you are capable to interact with the surrounding objects or persons that will aid you in your future missions by clicking onto them. This was a step further to StarCraft's enjoyable video conference call amongst the characters involved in the mission. It sometimes reveals a background of previous events that led to the protagonist or any character's development, which can be intriguing.
You designed the Queen of Blades. Your limbs wrapped me in the chrysalis.
These interactions with certain support characters may lead to another feature that has been borrowed from the RPG genre, which has frequently come up as the influencer to the RTS in more recent years.
You brought back credits this time, right?
It is the ability to earn credits after each successful campaign mission and objectives to purchase permanent unit or structure upgrades that carry over from campaign to campaign. You are also able to collect research points from other races found when completing optional mission objectives that will be used to further increase your tech abilities. At each amount of research points collected, you may select between 2 similar techs to aid you on your missions. The campaign mode lured you in because each mission had a unique objective. Yes, the RTS campaign objectives have moved on from simply base destroying, but the overall parameters and circumstances completely differed in each mission. There was a resource collecting campaign while avoiding moments of overflowing lava, controlling a larva to consume enemies in stealth to become stronger and destroy the enemy on the ship, ensure safe evacuation, all while stopping a stronger enemy from sabotaging the escape. Starcraft II has added a few non-world RTS features that we have not seen previously. One is the ability to rally worker units directly to harvest when recruited. A simple but an attention-saving feature that will help you with base growth and overall macro management. The other feature is the ability for certain units to jump onto one level tier of terrain height. The Reapers for the Terran, Colossi for the Protoss, and Zerglings with the evolution upgrade, only in the campaigns of the Heart of the Swarm, all have this capability. This can allow for quick and early rushes from both the Reapers and Zerglings to mass a hit-and-run strategy. The Colossi being granted the ability to leap level 1 cliffs is mainly to help with movement as they are very slow and clunky. Starcraft II has followed in the same footsteps as its predecessor, mainly focusing on the fine-tuning of already introduced RTS features, and as you can see, have not really put too much attention into gameplay innovation. Now getting into the content, Starcraft II conserves the 3 faction races of Terran, Zerg, and Protoss, each having about 20 completely unique units that contribute different roles. What stands out the most is the unit and structure variety between the campaign and multiplayer. The campaign seems to have exclusive units and upgrades that are not found in the multiplayer, mainly due to preserving the balance amongst the races, and it feels disappointing when one of your favorite units from the original StarCraft is not available on the StarCraft II multiplayer or even in the game at all. But I will say a lot of the new units introduced are an interesting change for the better. For example, the Firebat and Marine damage enemies differently, area and versatility being the 2 main methods, but essentially overlapped in effectiveness against lighter units. But now the Firebat has been replaced with a Marauder, who's more effective with armored units by dealing extra damage and slowing the already slow units down even more. The pathfinding is outstandingly smooth and efficient, and it's probably the best I have experienced in an RTS overall. The units move together in unison and will avoid objects and units while remaining in a group. They will automatically keep formation where similar units are bunched together. Heavier, armored, closer range units will remain in the front lines, and fragile, longer range units will have cover while attacking at the back. What is also intricate about the pathfinding is that all units have sensors, and they will shift when allied troops need to pass through them, rather than having the traversing unit recalculate and travel a different path to reach the commanded waypoint. The in-game visuals were sublime for its time, and a big step up from Company of Heroes released 4 years earlier. Much more detailed 3D in-game graphics with smooth movements that felt lively, especially when the buildings and units are destroyed. The debris and body parts fling all around. The music for Starcraft II was made using many different styles such as orchestra, guitar, and chants. But overall it feels very stale. It is much more subtle, and even when there is a change in beat, it is hardly felt. But this seems to be the new theme for modern RTS games, where the music does not seem to attract as much attention, and rather has become more ambient and less upbeat. This may be a bias for the amount of gameplay and nostalgia, but I can recall all the music from the classic and Golden Age RTS in a heartbeat. But I would have a much more difficult time recognizing any of the modern RTS music. The main reason behind this is that the music does not match the action. Wars and battles are full of suspense, hope, and high levels of emotion. That soft ambience won't do the RTS any justice. The multiplayer has always been a global staple for StarCraft, but has this transcended to its successor? And indeed it has, adding many new ways to enjoy playing and connecting with gamers all around the world through Battle.net, which had a major revamp labeled Battle.net 2.0 right before the release of Starcraft II. All Blizzard game accounts from World of Warcraft to Starcraft and Diablo were now unified under one platform rather than having to previously create accounts for each game series. The newer Battle.net includes a much more organized, user-friendly interface that allows matches to be set up faster through an improved matchmaking system. Within Starcraft II, there are various types of methods of entertainment, such as matching with the AI, team matches with other users whether ranked or casual, user 1v1s, and tournaments. And if you want to take a break by playing something different from what the usual RTS has to offer, I recommend trying the custom games that showcase other game genres. And these custom games were created mostly by players through the Starcraft II editor. We experienced a jam-packed versatile editor from Warcraft 3 that had developed some memorable custom games. Now imagine taking it a step further with Starcraft II editor that allows for game modifications from external sources, user interface changes, a role-playing level-up system with wider range of abilities to choose from, and much more. The story of Starcraft II had its moments by introducing new characters,
Putting that bitch down would be doing everyone a favor.
and bringing back some old ones that we come to hate
Hello, Ground.
or love. But at times it had cheesy moments, especially the ending, but it's the one that we all wanted to see.
It's about time.
I just have a hard time seeing a continuation coming from this unless it's set in a big time jump. Starcraft II had lived up to its name as it was both a commercial and critical success. It sold over 8 million copies to date, coming from all 3 installments. Most Starcraft II ratings on major gaming review platforms were nothing short of 9 out of 10 when including its entirety. And its recipe for success was once again the preservation of the original Starcraft and Golden Age RTS main elements. There was nothing introduced in this game that was groundbreaking. It was the idea of using an old but efficient car engine and adding newer external car parts to help make the ride smoother. I personally wish that the characters were more involved with the actual gameplay itself, like the heroes of Warcraft 3, with a leveling up RPG aspect. With being a game that really has in-depth interactions amongst the characters and that have become personable to the player, an RPG level up system to visualize their growth as missions are completed would have been more engaging. Sticking to the main RTS picture is never a bad idea, but it can be very difficult to attract a newer generation of gamers that hardly know what an RTS is and will eventually outnumber any other aging group of video game consumers. Don't take this the wrong way, as the StarCraft community is alive and well, and I still enjoy playing and watching professional matches once in a while. Is it possible for a genre that has now come to the point where it is no longer the center of attention able to have small developer names of the RTS still gain some attraction in spite of this? We can see the next game was able to pull this off by adding some features from another genre, the common theme of success for the modern RTS. Northgard was released in 2018 by Shiro Games, an independent video game developer that was formed in 2012. This RTS features many Nordic clans that compete and battle amongst each other to take control of a vast wild continent called Northgard. I will not delve any deeper in the story than that, as I can confidently state that the campaign story is not the strong point of the game. But other gameplay aspects that it has borrowed from other genres such as 4X, Explore, Expand, Exploit, and Exterminate is worth analyzing. The Explore is nothing new to the RTS, as it's an element that can help you with foreseeing enemy strategies and when they launch their attacks. But what differs in Northgard is that exploration is only possible through certain units and structures and is mandatory in order to conquer territorial control points. The exploration is a slower process in this game in comparison to a normal RTS, as a dedicated unit needs time to explore the invisible territories. Expand can only happen when the territorial point has been scouted first. Now, we addressed the territorial control points when we discussed Company of Heroes, and it is similar for Northgard in that the territory may have resource to collect of either food, lumber, stone, iron, and gem. Keep in mind that capturing territorial points should be done efficiently and slower in comparison to Company of Heroes, because the idea of expanding territories can quickly become burdensome to your resources and leave you vulnerable to raids. Note that in order to expand by conquering a territory, you'll need to eliminate all the enemy units, whether rival or neutral, beforehand, with your own military units. A usual RTS does not have the map separated in territories and is rather left open for any player to build freely and traverse the map at any point in time. Exploit is to efficiently gather the resources available in the territories. In Northgard, it is imperative to try to make the resource gathering process as efficient as possible. Food, wood, and crowns are both infinitely harvested or earned at a constant rate, and as you expand territories, the population grows and construction expands, thus these resources are more in demand. Researching better tools, lower research, building upgrades, and population happiness are means of increasing the efficiency of resource collection. The first two means require other finite resources to obtain, iron and stone respectively, and happiness is increased by the amount of territories occupied, the number of entertainment buildings such as breweries and Hall of Skalds, lore research, and temporarily through feasts. Happiness has a negative causation towards the population. In other words, as population increases, happiness declines. And when happiness is low, the population recruitment process is also slowed. And lastly, Exterminate in Northgard differs in a normal RTS because you gradually reach the enemy's base through territory conquest and don't have that option of attacking them at any time. And it is highly recommended to slowly take the territories away from the enemy, as it will starve them of resources and happiness. The idea of having a population happiness meter and research leveling up with an exclusive form of currency is unusual for an RTS, but seems to have been borrowed from the city-building genre games. In Northgard, there are a lot of survival factors that need to be addressed, and they are all interconnected amongst themselves, which increases the game's complexity. The standard RTS seems to have gamers focus mainly on military as a method of success in a match, but with Northgard and all of its additions, it has balanced your focus on many other non-military factors to survive. This in turn can help the RTS genre as a whole, because without realizing it, we tend to lose interest of conformity, and why not shake things up a little bit? There are some other RTS aspects that are not new at all but are worth noting is the unique specialty bonuses and units similar to that of Age of Empires II we come to cherish. The unique clan abilities allows players to pick according to their playstyle, such as the ones that favor military, defense, economy, and mercenary raid rushes. There may be some balance issues as certain clans are overpowered with their abilities. Example, the mercenary rushes of both the clan of the Raven and Kraken can help with disrupting enemy resource gathering in distant territories with no cost of losing any military units. The visuals and graphics are subpar, but they are detailed enough to understand what you are seeing, and you can expect that coming from a low-budget independent developer. Northgard has had some success financially, selling over 2 million copies as of 2020, and has received above average ratings on most major game review websites. I am not implying that this RTS has cemented itself in an all-time RTS list, and this has never been the point of these RTS timeline videos. It is more to show how the RTS has changed and developed over time, and it could be appreciated that Shiro Games has worked their way from the bottom of the gaming food chain to deliver an RTS 4X hybrid that has many aspects to keep you occupied in a match. The admiration that the game has been patched and updated multiple times goes to show you that this series can have potential for the RTS genre. I have given hundreds of hours of playing time to this game alone because of how much devoted time and challenge a match can take, but that almost wasn't the case when I nearly judged it for being indie, so I at least recommend giving it a try. And finally, to sum up the modern RTS era and for the whole RTS timeline, Age of Empires IV was released in 2021 by familiar publisher Microsoft, but with two new different developers, Relic Entertainment, which we have seen earlier with Company of Heroes, and Ait'sZ, who now holds the responsibility of overseeing the Age of Empires series as of 2019. Would the combined effort of the two developers match up to what Ensemble Studios created in the Genie engine for the first two successful installments of Age of Empires? The RTS takes place in roughly the same time frame as Age of Empires II, from medieval to the Renaissance.
Her name was Jeanne d'Arc.
It was interesting to see that it was decided to revert to this age, when from Age of Empires 1 to 3 seemed to have continuity in eras. Overall, it's a visually appealing RTS, with live-action documentary-style cinematics that we really haven't seen in an RTS before. It generally does bring each of the 35 campaign scenarios to life, with present-day photography of areas where great battles have occurred, tagged along with professional narration.
After almost 1,000 years, no traces of the bloody conflict can be seen.
The 4 campaigns consist of English versus the French, the rise of the Rus, French versus English again, and the Mongol invasion, all which we have heard their stories in Age of Empires 2, except the Rus, which left the player slightly disappointed of the repetition. But the campaign scenarios did have refreshed missions, with new objectives aside from base destroying, such as holding out sieges, taking out enemy reinforcements and stealth, and optional quests that will aid you on your main objective. Nothing new to what we have already seen in countless RTS before this one. Getting into the gameplay, a few new features have been introduced, one being the elevated terrain, which increases the sight of ranged units, and when they are mounted on walls they have better protection with increased armor and extra damage towards enemies. On top of having units garrison arrow-launching buildings such as castles and outposts, the wall-mounted units are a defensive addition that allows them to have these benefits not found in the garrisoning. Mobility to move around or descend from the walls, nearly unlimited units are able to mount and benefit from them, and lastly, incendiary arrows can be utilized to hastily destroy siege weapons. Another newly presented feature is the ambush ability. When units hide in stealth forests lightly covered in trees with red grass is usually the indication. Units can wait inside these stealth spots and can surprise attack enemies that pass by. Keep in mind that there is no stat boost gain, it is just advantageous to attack the weakest point of the enemy line, all while the enemy least expects it. There are only 10 civilizations, 2 which were added after launch, but still far less than Age of Empires 2, and each civilization have their unique units, ranging from 1 to 4. Disappointingly enough, a lot of units have been recycled from Age of Empires 2 of both the generic lines, such as men-at-arms, knights, and bowmen, that follow the same triangular counter formula, and the special units, such as longbowmen and janissaries. It would have been a breath of fresh air to see every civilization with more unique units. We can recall from previous RTS such as Starcraft and Warcraft III that this is totally achievable, as each faction in those games have entirely unique units. One ingenious feature that has been expanded on in Age of Empires IV are the SIB bonuses, or what I have referred to them in previous RTS as the faction unique characteristics. For example, the Mongols in Age of Empires IV seem to exploit their differences, allowing new tactics and different style of gameplay. They are not required to build houses to supply population, meaning endless hordes of armies for attacks. When they set buildings on fire, they use a pillage ability that allows them to gain resources, making launching attacks rewarding rather than taxing. Stone is not mined or traded, but rather collected by a unique building called an awa, which can also allow for double unit recruitment and further advances in research technology, all at the cost of the scarce stone resource adversely. The in-game graphics are not quite what I expected for a game released in 2021. They are less detailed in comparison to other RTS released during the same time. But graphics, in my opinion, have never been the point of emphasis for an RTS, as they always seem to be behind in comparison to other more extremely popular genres such as FPS and action-adventure video games, for example. But when in-game mechanics such as the AI and pathfinding take a step backwards in the RTS timeline is where the disappointment is felt. The units that are ordered to move to a certain point seem to take the least efficient route and cannot figure out a better path. We have not seen this since the first iteration of Starcraft, which is surprising that an RTS released in 2021 is still having these issues. Grouping and formations are present like that of Age of Empires II, where similar units gather close together and weaker or important units are hidden in the back lines. The attack area command has also downgraded in a sense that your large group of army will not break off on their own when confronting two smaller groups of enemies. Instead, they will focus on the few units they first encounter. And at times, the units in your large groups will have trouble surrounding a smaller group of enemy units and will appear to stride back and forth in confusion, making them utterly useless until you recommand them. You will need to frequently watch over your armies to ensure that they are effectively attacking the enemy lines. On top of this, there are many bugs that have been discovered since launch and have not yet been taken care of. Sometimes when you order your villagers to build, they seem to switch to sleep mode and waste time by having you order them to build again. Other bugs are as bad as the enemy AI becoming stuck behind a heavy, difficult to locate forest and thus not allowing you to complete the campaign as these enemy units need to be defeated. Despite all of this, Age of Empires IV has sold about 1 million copies on the first month released, and this certainly has to do with the series' past credibility of being one of the elite. But could that be said when actually delving into the game and critiquing it? Overall, still good, but not better than its last two predecessors, and there are many reasons we can proceed with, but in general, it lacks innovation and refinement. We hardly see any new RTS features aside from ambushing, high altitude benefits, and the few faction unique characteristics. We would have hoped to see some fusion with other genres as we have seen with early RTS in this modern era to keep it fresh and interesting. I felt that Age of Empires IV was made to be better than Age of Empires II rather than have its own personality and invention. After playing and analyzing the RTS recently, Relic has a lot they must address in terms of gameplay, bugs, and content addition. Hopefully with DLC and expansions, they will find their way back to delivering gameplay at an exceptional level. We have examined 4 modern RTS from mid-2000s to present that showed us the importance of resilience by being able to incorporate not just new RTS features, but loan features from other popular genres such as FPS, point-and-click adventure, 4X, or even the documentary movie genre. But we can agree that these new additions are minimal and almost not a main focus of attraction for the new generation of gamers. And in no way am I implying that this has and will save the genre as a whole, as we can see that there has been a big decline in players since the modern era. The RTS has been around long enough and had a golden age that it's reached its point where it's difficult to simply grow. There are many reasons as to why the RTS may seem to have neared its capacity of innovation. One reason is the game tactics really haven't changed since the genre started, nor can they. But this clearly is not the only reason for its decline. The fact that RTS are generally played best with keyboard and mouse really limits their ability to showcase games across all platforms. The console has always been popular, but has become the main go-to ever since the success of PlayStation 2 coincidentally the same time as the decline of the RTS. Time and investment of learning the RTS is also another detrimental factor to the audience attraction. The RTS relies on reaction time known as APM to be able to click and command as fast as possible to have success. Increasing APM needs practice and repetition, identical to learning anything new, and learning curves for the RTS can be gradual, and you can lose interest as gains are barely noticeable. And the levels amongst RTS players range quite drastically that new players can become intimidated and they will immediately cease to invest. We also cannot forget, because of the RTS popularity, radical changes to the basic RTS principles have bore a new genre called MOBA, Multiplayer Online Battle Arena. It has removed a few less interesting and time-consuming aspects of base building, resource collection, and unit recruitment, and it has focused your priorities on the micromanagement of a singular entity to maneuver, attack, and work with other teammates to destroy the enemy base. So you can imagine a lot of the RTS fanbase had converted over to MOBA, as it was simpler and more riveting than its parent genre. And lastly, one reason which I have touched on is that RTS will never be graphically or visually equal to any other of the popular genres. And even if they do possess state-of-the-art graphics, RTS are generally played in a bird's-eye view that is zoomed out, and you hardly enjoy the visual detail. I can admit that I have been guilty of pulling away from what was and will always be my favorite genre. But I always will remember the joy it had brought me in all three of its eras: classic, golden age, and modern. And even though this community is a dying breed, I still hope you give these RTS that I have gone through in all three videos a try. I also don't want to take away the fact that there are still new RTS that have come out recently, or that will be within the year, which are fun and worth checking out. There may not be as many RTS released as there have been in the past, but hopefully we can find a few that reminds us of a small but legendary genre. Well, we did it. We completed the RTS timeline. What did you think of the three videos? Anything you wished I could have showed? What are your feelings about the decline of the RTS? What is your favorite RTS? Do you enjoy the lengthy timeline videos, or would you rather I cover a certain game per video? Now that the RTS timeline is complete, I will likely begin a timeline possibly on another video game genre, such as first-person shooters, platformers, and I'll take any other suggestions. Also, do not worry if you enjoy the RTS. I will cover them again in the future videos, as I have some ideas. Also, I just want to say I appreciate the comments coming in. I enjoy the interactions with you. And please, if you did enjoy the video, comment or like or subscribe, or even better, do all three. Thank you for watching, and goodbye until next time.